all sorts of stuff Gamecock related, and we'll lead it off with our buddy Alex Jones, thebigspur.com. He's in the middle of covering Carolina basketball and some Carolina football and soon Carolina baseball. You'll be a busy one, Alex. Good morning, my friend. Glad to have you.
Good morning. Good morning. It's always good to be back with you. How you doing?
Well, we're good. I was looking earlier at the Baseball America 2025 preseason teams, 1, 2, and 3, first team, second team, third team. No Ethan Petrie. How about that?
Yeah, that's a shocker. I mean, we've seen what that guy can do his time here so far. And I mean, that guy, you feel like when you hear about MLB draft talk, he's one of the first guys that gets mentioned. And I think he's one that, I think a lot of people, when they talk about this South Carolina baseball team, there's, some questions, for some different positions, but Ethan Petrie is not one of those questions. And that's kind of surprising, to be honest.
Yeah. If anything, he provides a lot of answers for Carolina. Clearly, he's working at first right now. My gut tells me he'll probably run out there. We're going to actually talk to Coach Maneri tomorrow. He'll join us tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock for an exclusive here for about a half hour or so, and we'll talk to him about Ethan and where he best fits in the lineup and things of that nature. But he has become actually a pretty solid right fielder, But aside from that, I mean, this kid has hit 44 home runs in 2 seasons in the SEC, 128 RBI. Now, Alex, and I'll talk to Grayson about this in a little while too. One of the things that did happen last year, the strikeout numbers went up, and of course the walk numbers went up too. And in the batting average went down significantly. He still hit over 300. He hit 306. One of the things that they have, we get Monty before the season as well. I don't know if that'll be this week, maybe early next week. I got to figure it out with him. But, one of the things that this program has been focused on when it comes to having quality at bats is staying in the strike zone and not chasing a lot of pitches and things of that nature. It's kind of been a double-edged sword, though, because you feel like at times guys have taken quality pitches, especially with 2 strikes, maybe not protecting the way that they should. So they have drawn a ton of walks, but they've also brought on a lot of strikeouts. Have you heard anything on that, how they're addressing that in the offseason?
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things to track in the early part of the season is, what's the, hitting approach with this team. And I think there's a little bit last time you kind of mentioned maybe chasing a little bit too much out of the strike zone. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do from that. And, I think with Petrie, maybe it was just a little bit of, maybe trying to do a little bit too much last season. But, I think, talking to him at Media Day a couple weeks ago, he sounds like he's, ready to go, feeling really good, had pretty good time or a pretty good season. And when he's down in the Cape, and, I think he's ready to go. And this team, I think has a chip on their shoulder right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how they come out with that Sacred Heart series.
Yeah, look, basketball right now is SEC basketball, man, is getting all the fuss about the depth. And there could be 13 teams that get into the tournament and all that stuff. That has long been the case in SEC baseball. This has been going on for a long time in this league. I mean, everybody has a dude or a couple of dudes on the weekend, and generally there's 1 or 2 teams at the end of the year that you can go ahead and cross them off the list, but everybody else is usually in contention. And so, if anything, Carolina baseball understands the grind. The grind is new to SEC basketball. It is not new to football. It is not new to baseball. And this team returns a ton of players who have significant experience, lineup-wise and also on the mound. And if you ask me, the blue-collar kids out of that group, the LeCroys and I know Will Tippett has struggled a little bit here in the preseason, but the Will Tippett's, the Talmadge LeCroys, the Ethan Petries, all those guys. If those guys are going, Carolina baseball is probably going at a pretty good rate.
Yeah, and you mentioned how it's not new to a lot of these guys, the grind of the SEC. Well, it's not new to Paul Maneri either. I mean, that guy, we know his history. He knows what the SEC is all about, and it's continuing to get better, but he'll have those guys ready to play. And, I think when you look at this team, you have, some promise in that lineup from what you see, especially in that middle of the lineup. And I think, what fans are going to want to see early on is just, what the rotation looks like at the start. I think you feel pretty good about Jersenbeck being in there, possibly that game one starter. Maybe I remember a couple weeks ago at Media Day, Paul Maneri mentioned Dylan Eskew and Jake McCoy as potential front runners as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, what the rotation looks like, and especially, then just the top of the order, or what the order looks like. Obviously you're having a lot to replace that catcher. Is that going to be Talmadge Lee Croy back there behind the plate? You still got some pieces to replace, in the infield. And, a guy like Kennedy Jones, I think, is going to be a key player to watch. I mean, he's a guy who sounds like he has had a pretty good start to the scrimmages here. So this chance as a team has a potential to be fun to watch. And, I think you talk about some of the preseason expectations with this team, maybe being picked towards the bottom of the league. Well, I think that's just providing a chip on this team's shoulder. And you talking to them a few weeks ago, you could kind of hear how excited they were for the potential of the team, and they know how good they can be. Now it's just seeing if they can rise to those expectations.
Yeah, anybody that picks this team at the bottom or near the bottom of the SEC is going to be sadly mistaken. Now, I do think it's going to take them a little bit of time to figure out the best version of themselves. You mentioned Paul Maneri. Look, South Carolina baseball is Southeastern Conference baseball is loaded with quality coaches. But I can tell you right now, I'll go to the grave with this. Good luck finding me two that are better of a combo than Paul Maneri and Monty Lee. It's not there. I mean, there's a bunch of. I mean, I have so much respect for all the guys out there. Vitello obviously has done a magnificent job. Limo at Mississippi State, Sully. We could do this all morning. They're all wonderful. But I love the dynamic between these two because they do offset each other a little bit. Coach Maneri has a bunch of old school in him. He has certainly adapted to some new school stuff. Monty has a bunch of new school in him because he's grown up in it, but he's an old soul, and it's a really neat combo to watch. So I'll be interested this year to see, especially, like analytics is such a big part of the game. Those guys, obviously, there's a matter of fact, there's a time, Alex, where Monty probably leaned way too heavily on analytics, and he'd tell you that. And he's kind of softened that stance a little bit and gone back to the Ray Tanner, well, how you feeling today type deal. Paul Maneri's all over that. And so it'll be magnificent to watch these guys work. And when you see guys in the lineup, who maybe haven't been in lineup, or guys come out of the lineup, or whatever it is, or a lineup change, it will be awesome to be able to ask the question why, because I guarantee you their answer is going to be really, really thorough.
Yeah, and I think, that was one of Mary's maybe biggest recruits when he first got the job, was retaining Monty Lee on the staff, because as we know, Monty Lee probably could have gone to a lot of different places because he's a well-respected coach around the country, and he could have gone anywhere, and South Carolina and Paul Maneri found a way to keep him. And that was big for a lot of reasons, just because the players love Monty Lee, and I think that was big for player retention, was having a guy like Monty Lee back, and not only from the player retention standpoint, but just how good of a coach he is. I mean, he's shown that in his time at South Carolina, also in his time as the head coach and as an assistant before. So I think that was a huge get for South Carolina, and that's going to be something that, from a recruiting standpoint, he's really good in the state and really good just as a recruiter. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, and then obviously, talk about earlier with the plate approach, he continues to kind of work with those hitters and everybody else on the team. So I think that was a big, retain for Paul Maneri, was to continue to have Paul Maneri Monty Lee on the staff and the rest of the staff, talking to some of the pitchers about Terry Rooney. They had nothing but great things to say about him and how he's continued to help them develop.
Yeah, Terry Rooney's an interesting dude. Julie asked in the chat box who's throwing BP. It's kind of a combo. I mean, Monty will give it to him from the left side. John Henry is there. We will talk to them too about the use of the pitching machine. I didn't like it at all. It's good in certain scenarios, if you're working on things mechanically and stuff like that, but doing things like that on game day is a little bizarre. And that was a staple for a while around here. I think largely that has kind of made its way out the door. All right, if you had to pick, and then we're going to move on to some basketball. If you had to pick, who gets the ball next Friday night?
I go Eli Jersenbeck.
Yeah, man, I haven't been able to come off of that either, but Matthew Becker has just been phenomenal. And it wouldn't shock me to see him out there.
It wouldn't shock me either. I think, listen to Neri talk about him and kind of mention him as a wild card. Like, he's had a great offseason, and it seems like that's led into the preseason scrimmages. And, that's going to be kind of fascinating to see how they can use him, because they obviously he's got starting experience, but, kind of do they use him as that long inning closer, kind of, then if they don't use him early on, does he spot start on that Sunday? So South kind of has options, and they have depth in that pitching staff, which is something that, a lot of people are talking about is the depth. And I think the question with the pitching staff is, with Jersenbeck and those guys, the 1, 2, 3, like how do they match up with the rest of the SEC? But I think the depth of this pitching staff is something that's going to have them up towards the top of the league from a pitching standpoint, potentially up and toward the top of the league with it from a pitching standpoint. But if I had to guess today, I think I'd go with Jersenbeck being that number 1 starter coming next Friday against Sacred Heart.
A lot of innings return, and that's good in this league. A lot of innings return, and Eli is healthy. He's had some ups and some downs. I would attribute some of that, though, to just his teammates seeing a lot of Eli Jersenbeck. This team has scrimmaged more than any team I can remember, going back to the fall and through now. I mean, if you're Palminteri, there's no way you haven't seen everything that you could possibly imagine in you know what I mean, in game type situations. I mean, they scrimmage. Next week that'll all be over. By the way, as is custom every year, this year in the Midlands it'll be beautiful, 75, 78, sunny. Next week 50s. Told you.
Of course.
I've been saying this for weeks. Yeah, here it comes. Opening day. The baseball gods tease you, and then they slap you in the face. All right. Speaking of getting slapped in the face, that is continuing to happen to Carolina basketball. Another close one on Saturday night. What's the pulse of this group?
It's a group that keeps fighting, and you haven't seen any give up from this group. And I mean, they go out there and they fight every game. It's just, when you look back at this last game against Texas A&M, they just couldn't get over the hump. I mean, they had that run. Texas A&M had that run in the first half where they kind of got into a double-digit lead. But South Carolina offensively in this game played pretty well. I mean, they had a really good half. I think it was a 36-point half to start in the first half, and just couldn't quite get over the hump against Texas A&M, and it was kind of crazy start to that game. And you think about the threes that were falling between these two teams. I mean, both teams were having success from the 3-point line, and going into that game, that wasn't really the case. I mean, both teams kind of struggled for the most part, but when you have a guy like Wade Taylor, who's 7 of 10 from 3 in that game, with all 7 of his field goals being 3-pointers and having 25 points, like, he was the difference in that game. South Carolina in the second half battled back, got to within, I think, 2 points or so, but could never really get the tide or over the hump. And then Texas A&M kind of down the stretch just made the plays that they needed.
I think Wade Taylor is out of eligibility after this season, but if he's not, here's my prayer for the future of Gamecock basketball. He jumps in the portal, Carolina signs him, because the 2 games that he's played in this arena, 7 of 10, 25 points this weekend. 2 years ago, 4 of 6 from long range, 20 points. He likes the CLA for some reason.
Yeah, so he's a heck of a player. And like
tamper if you can.
Right. Yeah, he's a heck of a player, and I mean, like I said, he was a difference in that game. Like, there's a time early in that first half where he and Jamari were kind of just going back and forth with the 3-pointers, and every time Jamari hit one, it seemed like Wade Taylor came right down, and as soon as the crowd got into it, he'd knock down a 3 and extend Texas A&M's lead, and he was the difference in that game.
Yeah, let's talk about Jamari. When he was out, they clearly had a hole at the point, and since he's been back, let's see, he's played 3 games since he's been back. He scored a bunch of points, 19, 19, 15. For the first time in a long time against A&M, he did not have a turnover in the ball game. He did have 5 assists. Overall, I mean, he didn't shoot it as well as he had been shooting it, but overall, collectively, 2 steals, 15 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. That's a pretty good game from your point guard. And to be quite honest, while South Carolina certainly did some things in that game that helped them not come out on top against the Aggies, I give more credit to the fact that A&M just knocked down a ton of shots. I mean, what are you supposed to do about some of those, man? They're 35 feet. You're standing in front of them, and they fall in the hoop. It's just, it almost seemed like, just throw in the towel. This just isn't your year. It's just not going to go your way. I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to give up like that, but like when you look at how Carolina wins, I mean, they actually did a lot of the things on Saturday night that they typically win with. I mean, they didn't turn it over a ton. I know that they made some bad plays here and there, but it was nowhere near what it had been the last 5 games, man. And Jamari, while he had scored a bunch of points in the previous 2 games, 38 to be exact, at 19 apiece, he had also turned it over 10 total times, and that number just wasn't good. So he corrects that, and I felt like they corrected a lot of stuff the other day, dude. But they just as close as they would get. A&M would slam the door in their face, and that's why you wonder. It's like, what do we have to do to win a game? I don't know how much more the team can do.
Yeah, I imagine that's a very frustrating part for Lamont Paris, the coach staff, and the players, was that they overall played a pretty good game. It's just, as you mentioned, Texas A&M knocked down big shots, and really shots that it seemed like for the most part they had struggled to make for most of the year. And you mentioned Jamari Thomas. He's been, since he came off of injury, he's been pretty solid overall. I mean, he's from a defensive standpoint, we see what he can do, guarding the ball. But offensively, he did have some of the turnover issues. But in that Georgia game, especially in the second half, he at least didn't let that game get away from South Carolina. I mean, Georgia probably could have run away with that game, but Jamari was knocking down 3-pointers, and he was kind of the offense in the second half, and at least kept that game potentially within reach for South Carolina. But obviously that didn't happen. But he's shot the ball pretty well here since he's come back, and you kind of wonder if maybe sitting out and seeing more of what Lamont wants from a point guard has kind of helped him. But he played probably one of his best games overall against A&M. It was just Texas, like I said, Texas A&M just continued to make shots when they need them and wouldn't let South Carolina get over the hump.
Matt asked in the chat box here, Matt, I'm not picking on you, my man. Please don't take this in the wrong way. But he says, at what point do you start playing the young players more to develop for next year, like Cam Scott? Look, Alex, maybe exactly why. I'm only speculating based on the things I've heard. It's just that Cam Scott is not going to help them at all, and they're not. Lamont Paris is so competitive; he's just not. Just let these guys play. Let's just keep losing. Like, he's going to try to win games. I don't know who. They don't have anybody else to play. I mean, they're playing everybody, right? There's no secret sitting around or again, Matt, don't misunderstand. My tone's probably a little off here, but don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not picking on you, dude. I'm just saying I don't. There's not like a bunch of young players to just throw in there. So obviously, there's a reason why Cam isn't playing.
Yeah, and from a young player perspective, you saw Jordan Butler play more against Texas A&M. He had 10 minutes and knocked down to 3, and I think he had 2 blocks. So, I think he's one where he's just having to continue to develop, and it's going, maybe you see more of him, because I thought he showed a little bit in that game. But, I think they still want to see more from him on the defensive side of the ball as well. So I think, you're kind of seeing what you're going to see right now for the rest of the season. Maybe you see Cam Scott continue to earn reps maybe in practice and get more playing time. But, guys like Arden Conyers and Mars, still some young guys who are showing some potential and developing. But, I think right now you're kind of seeing what you're going to see.
Yeah, Derek was talking before the A&M game about the fact that Jordan Butler would be a guy to keep an eye on. He plays in games that he matches up well. Mm-hmm. He is not physical down low. I think he's taken like 20 shots or something this year total, and 19 of those have been from 3-point range. You realize that? Isn't that wild? He's 7 feet tall.
Yeah, it seems like most of his shots have come from 3, and he kind of plays like it seems like he's more on the perimeter when he's in there, and I think maybe that's something that they want to see more of from him, is being more physical down in the post. Like, he had 2 blocked shots, and I mean, he's 7 feet tall, so I think he can be a weapon down there, down low. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what he kind of develops into. And obviously you see the potential in him and what he can be. He's got the outside shot down pat, but I think just maybe from my perspective, just want to see a little bit more of him down the post, because I think he could be a great post player as well.
All right, final one here. I know that Whittle has kind of spoken about some of this on the message boards. I'm not going to throw out the exact numbers because I can't verify them, but my understanding is that from an NIL standpoint, Mike and I talked about a little bit of this yesterday. Carolina is significantly behind most of the teams in the SEC. Probably need to double that number, and maybe this coming year, probably gonna have to even go higher than that because it just continues to go higher. What have you learned about the NIL situation with the basketball program? How do they fix it?
I think it can always be better. I think it was probably better after an NCAA tournament run. Probably had some more come in, but I think you're going to need maybe a little bit more this year because think about what South Carolina's going to need in the transfer portal. I mean, you got some guys leaving, and you got some holes to fill, and I think they're going to have to hit the transfer portal pretty hard. And we all know this day and age in college sports, like NIL is huge in the transfer portal. It's not the end all be all with some guys, but it plays a big part. And the SEC is becoming a league where it's everybody has it and everybody has the players, and I think South Carolina just needs to continue to improve in that aspect because it's going to be a big off season for South Carolina men's basketball. With they got guys like I said, a lot of guys are placed, and they need to not overhaul the roster because they do have some pieces, but they need bring in some key pieces that kind of the play show improvement. Obviously, improve from this year to next year, but they just got a lot of replacing it. They're going to need it.
It's proven you can do it quick.
Yeah,
and we'll see what it looks like. Alex, we'll let you run on that note. We got to get to Strick here in just a second. But you got a lot going on. Football, baseball, basketball. It's all intertwining and overlapping right now.
It's always always going, never stops, and basketball is going to keep going. Women's basketball keeps going, and they keep winning. And then before we know it, it's kind of crazy to think about baseball here is only getting close to a week away.
Yeah, 10 days away until first pitch. No doubt. Can't wait. Talk to you next week, brother.
Appreciate it. Always enjoy being on. Thank you.
Yeah, man.